We are going to learn how to create, read, and update using Node.js and Mongoose. Mongoose, for those who don't know, is a object modeling tool for MongoDB because all the connection and how to create a user and also all these little tools to create, read, or update into the database are available using the Mongoose, which make our life much easier. So now let's get started. First thing I'm going to install is an initial file. In this case I use npm image-y. -y will make us not to type all the requirements of the file. Will pre-fill with a default version, as you can see over here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to install npm I'm going to install the express, which will handle all the requests and posts. I'm going to install Mongoose, which will take care of a database connection, inserting and searching for a user. And I'm going to also install NodeMon, which will refresh our app with each update instead of us having to kill the command on the terminal and restart it. So I press enter. Cool, now it's running. Another thing I'm also going to do is to create a docker compose.yml file. Why? Because pretty much I don't use as much as I need, because I just use like for dev applications or for tutorials for myself, so I don't use much at work or anywhere else despite for my spare time. So I don't have Mongo installed on my computer, so I will create a docker container of the Mongo. And if you're just like me, who don't have also a Mongo installed on your computer, you can just use the same docker compose that I am using. I will make available in a Git repository, so don't worry guys, in case you. So pretty much this is the version of our docker compose file. These are their services, which in the case we just going to have one docker Mongo container. This is the image, and this is the environment variables. Mongo by default they accept in each root username, and they need to be root password, which in our case is going to be root and root 1234. And here are the ports, because in the docker compose file you need to specify which port the app will be exposed to. So in this case, by default Mongo already exports to the port 27017, and here we're exposing to the same port 27017. And the command that we're going to run is mongod, which will initialize our database. Saying that, our next file is going to be a server.js. On the server.js, we're not going to put anything by now. I'm going also to create another folder, which will be the models, and inside the models I'm going to create a user.js. And with this user.js, I'm going to create a const calling mongoose. Everything will make more sense later, but now we already have installed mongoose. Require we are going to create a schema. User schema equals new schema. We need to create this schema because it's the approachable way that the documentation on Mongoose says for declared for us to install and use Mongo. So they acknowledge it's the best practice to use a schema. So having said that, we are going to create this user schema, which will contain name, and here we put the type, which is going to be a string for the name, and also we put if it's going to be required true or not. In this case, it's going to be true because it's important to have a name in the database. We also have to put the email, it's going to be the type string, require true. But on the email, we're also going to put another parameter, which is unique true, because if we have the same mail twice, the authentication will break, right? And the password type string require true. Finishing that, the only thing that we need to do is export. So we use module.exports equals to mongoose.model and here we put user username user schema. Now we already create our user schema, which will be used in the other files. So pretty much when we are going to create a user or delete an user and we are going to export this file and import in the server.js, it will make everything handy for us because it's going to expect these parameters and this format structure. So everything we will need to do is just create on the server.js like user.create, user.delete. Cool. Now we are going to our server.js file. First thing that we are going to do is to get our user equals require and then I import here point slash models slash user. Now we also connect to our database mongoose.connect. But before we connect to the database, let's connect to the database and see how it works, right? I think this is also an important thing to do. So first thing, if you never run a database using Docker, we just need to type docker dash compose up. Now it's creating the network and our database is already running. So I'm just going here, and the way we connect to a database in our case using password, which is the username and password, we need first to do a docker ps to inspect and see which our container ID, which in the case is this one. With the container ID, we are going to type docker exec dash it. We put the docker container ID and we type bash. What this function does is execute the docker, an interactive bash terminal inside this container. So as this container is a service, it's pretty much as you have your machine running that service already. So a virtual machine in this case. So if you consider this as a virtual machine, the way to connect like the SSH would be like that, because it's locally on your computer. And once you does that, you're going to be able to access all the functionalities available on that machine, which is the Docker container. It's just an analogy if you use already or use it with virtual machines. So we do that, and now to connect your database, as you can see here, there is just the main files for the container to be able to run. Now I'm going to clear, and to connect your database I'm going to type mongo -- host localhost -u root, which is the user, -p root 1234, which is the password. So it's Mongo, the host, localhost, the user, root, and the password. And now we need to select our database. In this case, I'm going to use a user database. So I type use user data. Now switch it to db user data. If I want to insert a user, I just need to type like db dot users dot insert one, and then I can type over here like name Pedro, mail Pedro at test, and password. Pedro 1234. And when I do that, I am creating this table over here, users, and inserting one user into the users DB. So as you can see here, acknowledge true, inserted, and it returns us this ID. And if I use db users find like this, it's going to return my user. And if I use db.users.drop, it will remove my user. This is exactly what we're going to do using the Node.js. So it's going to be pretty chill and nice to code along. So now we are still on our server.js file. We are going to connect to our database using the driver connection, mongo db // localhost are going to see this way is not going to work because we have an authentication using the root and the password. So in that case we need to do exactly like this. MongoDB, and here we put root column root 1234 at localhost, and when we get into the localhost user data, we put an interrogation of source equals admin. So now it's going to connect using also the authentication. Otherwise, you connect to the database, what you're going to notice, it doesn't matter what you try to create, read or update, it's not going to authenticate, so it's not going to perform, it's not going to persist. With this, we are going to create a basic structure for the Express now, the Express file. So I think the first thing we need to do is to export the other ones, like express const express equals require express already came with body parser, which is going to be pretty useful. Body parser is a function that was once separated from Express, but they saw so useful that they thought in integrating one with the other. So now when install Express, it already came with the body parser, and pretty much make our body more easier to understand and read, because it already processed all the chunk of the request, so it just retrieves the body for us, and then we just need to work with the body instead of all the things that came along, like a lot of other things. So, we're going to use the Express to create some endpoints. So now that we have already imported our user, already made our Mongo connection, we can create some endpoints and then later on test them. So in order to create endpoints, we have to have a listener, but beforehand we need to define which port our app is going to listen. So in this case it's going to be 8000. Also we need to make an instance of Express, and also declare that we want to use the body parser, body parser.json, which will make our life in receiving the body of our posts a way easier to filter and modify. And also now you're going to choose the app.listen. We give the port and we make an anonymous function here. And we put console.log listening having done that, over here we can create our endpoints. So Express is pretty explicit in terms of creating the endpoints and also the methods you want to use. So let's suppose we want to create a user. So we use app.post parentheses, and here we put \users, and then we define over here the requisition, the response, and we make the user dot create, which is in this case is not going to work yet, but I'm going to first create all the endpoints, and then later on we start implementing the user functionalities for each one individually. So next one is going to be our read. So we are going to use app route \users ID. So what this means, in the route that they use the user type users \users column ID can be redirection to one of these endpoints, which the first one is get, and then we are going to make the request, response, user dot find by ID. So in case the user type on the URL or he tried to get from a get method, he will get the user's find by ID, which will later on give the requisition point ID from the user, and then he will be able to retrieve this. Another one, if we want to update the user, so we can just use dot put over here and do the same thing. Requisition, response, and then we type user dot find by ID and update. And the last one, delete. Requisition, response, and here we are going to put user dot find by ID and delete. As you can see over here, it's pretty easy, right? Like Mongoose, he already have a very clear syntax of what you can do. So in the app route, it's going to wait for users and ID, and with this ID, if you use get, it will go to user find by ID. If you use the method put, it's going to find by ID and update, and then if you go to delete, it's going to delete. Function we are going to create is the users.create. So in order to do so, we are going to open a little bit over here, and first thing that the user needs to receive in order to create one is the parameters, right? So what we defined on user.js is going to be the name, the email, and the password. So it will follow the same convention is going to be the name, and then to receive the name we're going to use the requisition dot body dot new data dot name, and for email it's going to be email rec dot body dot new data dot email, and the password rec body dot new data dot password. We do that, but also we need to be aware of like errors can occur, maybe the user doesn't type the right thing, so we also need to create some response, right? So we type error and we type the data, and then we make an anonymous function if error, we type response.json success false, and we give the message as well, message error, and put else if it's different from data, rest.json success false, and the message not found. And the last one is success. JSON success equals true, and data equals data. Here we check in case of it's different from data, so it doesn't exist. So the first conditional, if error is filled, it will retrieve a message error. If there's no data, there's like not found, because maybe one of these parameters wasn't sent. And if neither of these two occur, you go to the success. And now, in order to test, I save this, I open my terminal, and one thing that I need to do before anything else is go to my package.json and create a start script. So I'm going to type start node1, and then I type server.js, and then I put the comma over here. And now when we run our app, it's going to work. npm start, as you can see, it's going to work with node1. So what this means, it means that if we type anything like any changes, it will reload the app for us. We don't need to kill the terminal and restart the app. This is good because we can just let the app running and make the changes on the fly, and it's not going to affect us. So To test it, we are going to need our Postman or the one that I use, which is Thunder Client, sorry. And then I can type new request Thunder Client for those who don't know, to show my extensions. Thunder Client, for those who don't know, is just a lightweight REST API client. So it works as the same as a Postman, but of course it's just on your browser, so a lot easier. In order to test or create of users, we need to pay attention what we are having here. Like, the method is a post, so first thing we need to change over here is the method to post. And how do we get to this \users? So we are going to type localhost, or we can even type the full path, http ://localhost 8000. This is the port that we defined it, our app was going to listen to over here. App listen to port, and the port is 8000. So listening to that, we just put \users, which is the users over here. And now, after doing so, you just need to go to the body, choose a JSON format. I put this a little bit down, yeah, and then I can just create new data. And then I'm going to have the name, team, the email, team@gmail, and the password, which is going to be 1234. So having done that, is going to fall into our app post users requisitions. Then we are reading over here like rec, body, new data, name. I've just put this new data in order to be easier, like just to new data, name, new data, email, instead of like body, name, body, email, body, password, because then you can say, oh yeah, there is this new data, which enclosures everything. So if I hit send, you can see over here, we receive a success true, a data, a name, a email, a password, and this ID. It's pretty important if we just copy this ID and we create just a dummy file over here, or even if we put over here as a comment like user ID 14, and we save over here, because this will be very handful when comes to over here, because we are going to need to use this ID. So just keep in mind to save somewhere, could be in a text note or anywhere else, and then we are going to use later on to our next function, which is going to be defined by ID. Method is going to be as easy as the creation one was, but instead of receiving like here that we use the body. In this case we're receiving a get, so it means that our parameters is going to be in the URL, not on the JSON, not in the body. So this make our life much easier, because then we just need to type rec dot params dot id, which is already expected over here, and then we can go to our function over here. And type error or data, and then go to our treatment of the response, which is going to be if error, we type rest.json, give success false, and message error. And here is going, if you want to just copy and paste, it's going to be exactly the same. So this is what I'm going to do. And now, in order to test, you just need to open your browser, or if you want to use a request, we go over here, we type get, and then we go users and ID. So users slash, and I copy this, I paste over here, and I send, and then I receive my user ID, name, and email and password. So this was the get function. To update is going to be easier too, but it's going to be more similar to the create function, because over here we are going to need to receive as well the ID, but also we are going to receive the body, which will contain, I'm going to give space over here, we are going to receive the body as well, because it's going to contain our new data. So name dot rec dot body dot new data dot name and email rec dot body dot new data dot email and the password rec body dot new data dot password. And then over here we send new equals true, and then over here we just treat the response. For data equals function, then we copy and paste exactly the same function. I think you already noticed that we're repeating these over and over, right? So just hold on, let's test, let's finish our integrations, and then we go to some refactoring later in the course. So nice. Now to test this, we're going to make, first we identify what is the method that is using. So as you can see here, it's the put. So we go here, put users is going to be the same, but just the method that changed, and the body is going to slightly change. I wouldn't say it's going to change much, but now we want to put a new data, right? So we're going to put Pedro. We are going to type Pedro@gmail, and the password secret password. And once I send this, you're going to see the success true. And if we search for the same user over here but using a get, you're going to notice that our user is not Ting anymore, it's Pedro, which is pretty cool. So all this function does is to receive the parameters ID, to receive the body, and updates, giving a new equals true. So this was the find and update function. Find by ID and delete will be very similar to get in this case, because we're just going to need to receive a parameter ID, and then everything else will be done. So we are going to put a rec dot params dot ID, and then we make the error treatment, create the anonymous function, and then we verify if the message is true, false, or not. So I'm just going to copy this and paste over here. Cool. Now to test it, we just need to use the same ID that we are using before. So I'm going to copy. Also, I'm going to start my .compose in order to work. Close it up. If you're following along this tutorial, you don't need to do this again. It's just because I restarted my machine. Cool. Now everything's going to work. And then I go to my new request. First, I'm going to use a get to get my user. Not found. Let's see. Error. Not get user. Cool. Let me see. Over here. It's users. Sorry, guys. Users. Cool. Now if I just success true, Pedro Gmail. So now if I delete, I'm just going to put the delete one, and then give it true. Now if I go to get, there will be no more user, not found. So this is pretty useful, like if you want to delete a user or you want to get a user, it's going to be particularly the same. So this is it. Now we are going to some refactoring, and with our refactoring we are going to see things that we could have done a little bit different. So first thing I would like to do over here is choose the spread operator. For you who don't know what is the spread operator, basically if you have an array just like this, name, email, and password, instead of making the assignment for each variable, we can just use 1, 2, 3 rec dot body dot new data, and then this spread syntax we already assign each value for the corresponding variable. So just this line will take off all the hustle from this one. And this we can do for the others one as well, like this, find by ID and update. And also another thing that we were doing over and over, and I don't think it's a good practice, is this error treatment function. So instead of doing that, we can just go over here to the bottom and create a function, send response, and then we get the response, the error, and the data. And with this, we can just go over here, copy this. If we just copy these parts of the if, and then I will paste over here. So as you can see, it's pretty simple, nothing different. And in order to use this, what we are going to do is get this response, and as you can see over here, we are going to still use this anonymous call to a function, but instead of doing this, we are just all this interaction over here, we're just going to call the send response and send the parameters like response, error, and data. So now when this thing happen, like or data come through or an error, we'll just call this function and give the response that came from the parameters over here, error or data, and then it goes to our send response. So this pretty much can be done for each one, because we are doing the same stuff over here. So if we just copy this and put over here, you see how easy it becomes. And this can be done over here as well. Over here. And that's it. And now we can just go and test it. I will go to my client, action. Client. I'm going to post, and then I can create a user, and as you can see here, it's working. If I copy this and then I go to the get a user, I still get the user, and if I try to change the user, changes. If I try to get again the user, it will get with the new updated version. And if I delete the user, it works as well. So this is all, guys. I hope it was easy to understand, and if you got any doubt or any suggestions on how could I have done better, please let me know in the comments below, and I will happy to make any changes. Thanks.